Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is our second day for our Beginning Again retreat. Grateful to have everybody here with us live, and thanks to you who are watching our archive. Kathryn Floyd's our next presenter. She's going to talk about the tale of two transitions. So, Kathryn, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and afternoon to you guys who are on the East Coast. I wanted to share with you, and I thank Denise so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you my story of what I've gone through throughout my caregiving circumstances. And hopefully what you will learn from me is how to come out of a place of feeling lost and not feeling like yourself and figuring out who you are when you go back to work or after the fact, when you create your own. I ended up creating my own, and here's how. So a little bit about me. I could tell you all about that. I'm a college graduate that I went to the University of Alabama, got my degree in healthcare management from the business school, that I have over 25 years in healthcare, IT, and operations, that I got my certified senior advisor certification, and through Denise's program, I became a certified caregiving consultant and educator. More recently, I have become an insurance agent, which I thought about for years. But the most important thing, and the reason why we're all here, I am a caregiver. So I've been a caregiver since my late teens. And if you think about your grandparents, everybody's taking care of them. And then, of course, your parents. But I started out in my late teens. I had a very close relative who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And that changed my life early on. My grandparents, who lived next door, they were very close to me, like a second set of parents. And throughout the experience of caring for them, I really did, and seeing my parents care for them, I learned so much, even until my last grandparent passed away in 2007 at the age of 100. It was a blessing to be able to take care of them, learn how to really respond to all of the challenges that come, the hospital visits, the unexpected illnesses, and watching my parents just be champions through it all. And in 2012, I became the primary caregiver, actually earlier than that, but we'll just say in 2012, when my father was in his last phase of prostate cancer. And after then, exactly a year after, just shy of 2 weeks, my mother had a stroke, almost to the first anniversary of my father passing. So I, like I mentioned, was a healthcare consultant I was doing traveling in my early years. For 13 years, I traveled across the country putting in systems and advising on how to put systems in and best processes and flows. This very proactive person goes in and she's telling everybody about what to do with their system, but her own life was about to change. So what you'll hear from me today is all of a sudden, and then you'll hear about when caregiving hit me. And then Kathy Fierce, if you've heard about Beyonce saying she has this alter ego called Sasha Fierce, my alter ego is Kathy Fierce. I was in the workforce. I was just kicking tail and taking names. I felt so accomplished, like a champion. I was helping people in the healthcare industry, but you know, I really felt good in my life at that point in time. And then there's caregiver Kathy. So there was a battle. We'll talk about the first transition and how I determined how I needed to establish credibility. And then transition two, it happened more recently during the COVID days, and I call it the COVID pivot because everything changed from where I was headed before. And then at the end, I'll share with you what I learned. So everything began with the call. I was celebrating my 41st birthday in Dallas with some girlfriends. We were having a girls' weekend. And just to let you know, it was kind of a weird weekend, and I felt something coming on. I got a call from my parents one evening, and they said, one of the 3 evenings I was out there, and they said, what's going on with you guys out there? I said, oh, we're just having a good time. We're at home right now because it's, cold. We're at one of the girls' houses. And they said, oh, okay, that's nice. Well, we were just wondering, that last MRI or head x-ray your dad had, do you remember what they said it was? And I said, no, I don't recall anything. I'm just wanting to get back to my life. But then I had a feeling something's going on. So from that point in time, everything changed. I flew back to Tennessee and then drove to Alabama. My father was going from doctor to doctor, and I realized I had to step in because my mother nor my father were able to tell me what the doctors were saying. So being their advocate, or his advocate at the time, I found out through a specialist, a spine and neuro specialist, that he had, his prostate cancer had metastasized out of the prostate to all of his skeletal frame, including his skull, had gone through the tissue between the skull and the brain and attached and was taking growth on his brain. The doctor, in the middle of March, the doctor they did surgery on my father, and he came out pretty good. He wasn't confused. He was 83 years old, but he still wasn't quite himself. And the doctor had given the prognosis that it was a very bad prognosis, that he only had a few more months to live. So at that point, that's till death do us part. I was determined that through the love I have for my father, and I was a daddy's girl and still am to my very soul, I was going to be with him through every step of the way. I did not want to miss a thing. I was going to go to every appointment. So I lived 2.5 hours north of them, and they're in North Alabama, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm driving back and forth 2 and 3 times a week doing conference calls on the telephone, on Bluetooth in my phone, going to the doctor's appointments, having a relative bring my dad to the doctors, and I'm meeting them there, and then I take them home. Then I go back to Nashville all in the same day. And then there's another appointment that comes from that. So I kept a journal of his meds, his allergies, what was working, what wasn't working, what all of the doctors were saying. And throughout it all, my mother, she started deteriorating, but we worked through that, and I took the brunt of everything. I worked out an agreement with my workplace, and I moved into my parents' home for the last 3 months of his life. I had home health come in and work with him. And then I had hospice come in about a month later. My father was unable to respond to the neuromotor functions. You could tell him stand up, and he'd do this, but then he'd sit back down because he couldn't put it together. What did stand up mean? So he ended up being bedridden. And that's when it got very hard. We had sitters that came in 24/7 around the clock, but sometimes there was a gap. But my family and we made sure he was totally comfortable. So from March, when the surgery occurred, to September 5th, my father had he had the most challenging days of his life, but if I have to say, he had the most beautiful time, because I made sure he had a very smooth transition to be with God. Then things you never think about that happened in life, the unexpected marriage. My dad was gone. My parents had been married 56 years. My mother was lost, totally lost. And basically, I told her, Mom, we've got to pair up. We're together. I said, I'm daddy now. I'm your new husband. So anything you need, anything you don't understand, I don't want to disrespect you and your independence, but you need me and I need you. And statistically, I never shared with her that within the first year of a spouse dying after 50 years of being together, usually the second one goes within the first year because they're so lonely. So every week I went home every weekend, I went home for 9 months from November all the way till July. And imagine the guilt I felt when August 15th of 2013, Mom had a stroke. I thought it was my fault. I felt like I abandoned her. We had a lot of things that we had started working on and trying to put in place. I immediately, once we executed Dad's will, I helped her to change all the accounts into her name. We changed insurances or put new insurances in place. I learned about annuities with death benefit. I learned about her to get tax at, her tax to the house. Her insurance man came to the house. I learned a lot during that time, and we'll come back to that near the end of this story. But just know that I was there for my mom. But while I burned through FMLA in these 6 to 7 months, while I took a month of unpaid leave to help her execute the will and take care of all the business that remained, I was just confused. And that's the best thing I can think of. And Denise, if you could take a look in the chat room, how many of you have had, that period of time in which you have just been so confused and lost, and you just know that you're not the same person?
Yeah, so we're hearing from Deb and Jennifer and Leslie and Teresa, and they're all giving a resounding yes. So, Kathryn, I'd love for you to get right into the meat of your presentation and start telling us about your transitions.
Yes. So all of this and understanding where all of this came from for me, my background as caregiving, it sort of leads into the work Kathy versus the caregiver Kathy. The work Kathy, working for large academic medical centers or healthcare corporations, she was in control of it all. She was proactive versus reactive. She handled all these projects for the C-suites. She worked 10 to 16-hour days. She never missed a deadline. She felt like a conqueror. Versus caregiver Kathy, who felt a lot of guilt. She wanted to be the best employee, but she had no control. She was only reacting to everything that happened. She did the best all that she could out of love. She had good days and bad days along with her carries, and she couldn't stick to a schedule. So everything was always shifting and changing. They were consistently inconsistent. And I constantly prayed I was doing the right thing. So who am I? That was the first thing after Dad passed. I didn't feel like the same person. I had never seen anybody take their last breath. So I was like, oh my God, what just happened? I don't know what I just saw, but I just don't feel like the same person. And where do I begin? I've got to go back to Nashville to work, but I'm doing some conference calls. I'm trying to juggle all of this. It just doesn't feel the same. And the next question, will I ever feel like myself again? Once I got back to Nashville, and I'm going home on weekends, but I had to find a new normal because I just didn't know what to do. I left my corporate America world because I felt no more aggression. I felt no more passion for the tedious work and the hardcore days of dealing with type A doctors and pushing myself to do my best for them and the patients. I was my daddy's my daddy's girl, and I was my mother's husband now. So I had to reflect upon what I went through and try to make the most of it, because even after I left my corporate America job, I had to figure out, what am I doing with these contracts? I started taking healthcare IT contracts, but I still didn't feel the same. I was trying to be flexible, earn an income after so many lost wages, especially during this time period. Take care of my mother and be flexible, because after a stroke, they have so many illnesses, from UTIs to confusion and other issues and therapy, and just everything you can imagine went wrong. So what did I learn? I learned that I needed to, number one, figure out what I wanted to do to help others. And that was in my heart and soul. Help other working family caregivers, people just like me, any age and gender, figure out how to help take care of their parents, how to organize, plan, and manage what it is that they could do for their parents, from the financial to figuring out how to keep track of, all of the comings and goings. Help them with insurance, understand what's going on with their health insurance, figure out bills. And I said, that's my background. I just need to transition. But first, I needed credibility. So I started working around on the computer in the evenings, looking at associations or societies that tied into caregiving. And I found Denise's caregiving.com at the time, now the caregiving years. And I really learned that, hey, this is one way to make myself credible. I went through the SAGE program and became a caregiving consultant, caregiving educator, and facilitator. But I realized that there's still something that I could do. And that is to also become certified or licensed and in a few more things, and create my own niche. And that was becoming a certified senior advisor, because working through my parents, and also people learned, they told me they respected a lot of what I was doing for my parents. So in this form of giving back and helping others, I learned that I could be an advisor. I could work with financial advisors. I could work with legal counsel regarding elders and elder attorneys, elder care. And so I started talking to them. I built my network of professionals. And that also helps with referrals to my services or any products that I was going to sell. But one particular elder care attorney said, wow, a certification in caregiving and education. I said, well, that is something that I figure I could help you with, and I could work under. That's some things that some elder care attorneys are doing. They're bringing in people with the expertise of caregiving, insurance, helping people with medical bills, understanding that. And I'm like, wow, this is really starting to feel like me. Then, of course, I had transition 2. Just before going into transition 2, I had started going out and speaking with insurance people and being like, they were keynote speakers, and I was going on tours in different states, and I was speaking about caregiving and the cost of caregiving, planning for the expenses of caregiving, so that people won't be in this reaction mode. They would be in a proactive mode financially, possibly, and also in knowing how to take care of their parents and themselves. That's something I also learned about myself, that I did not want to be, I was single at the time. I did not want to be stuck in a position where I didn't have a will, powers of attorney. So the legal documents needed to be in place. And also, there's something to say about helping people understand insurance, and not just insurance as far as annuities and life insurance, but understanding how Medicare works in certain instances with home health and hospice, how the difference between home health and hospice. There's so many people who don't understand that. So I'm working on educating people who are planning for retirement from different employers. I have some people that I'm working one-on-one in a CSA arena, helping them understand how retirement works. Yes, they may have insurance at work, life insurance at work, and they may have health insurance, but after you retire, there is no life insurance. All those premiums that you were co-paying with your employer, the premiums were being co-paid by you and some taken up by the employer, that's gone. And also that your health insurance, if you don't have Medicare, if you're not 65 or 67, you don't have Medicare yet, and you need a secondary, or you need to understand Medicare Advantage. Just a lot of pre-planning. And this is the type of work that I really have found myself to feel good about. And the credentials that I gained along the way, they make me feel positive about the things that I'm giving to other people in helping them with retirement, helping them with caregiving and planning for it financially. There are some policies out there. And I learned this while I was working with an insurance person, touring with her as she was the keynote speaker, that there are policies that have living benefits where if you have a critical injury, chronic illness, terminal illness, critical illness, it has coverage for you while you're living, and you can take advantage of these policies. Because how many of you actually know exactly what I'm talking about? Have you ever heard of living benefits? Denise, is anyone responding?
No response yet. I'd really love for you to talk about your transitions and what you learned from them, and then how you can help people with their own transitions, which can feel so scary.
Yes. So all of this is to say, I went from not knowing what I was going to do financially, not having that fight for corporate America, not having, going through the transition of not being a good daughter in taking care of my mother because I'm working all the time, to not being a good employee for those who I worked for, whether it was contract or whether it was full time. It just didn't feel good. I was not happy with myself. I didn't feel fulfilled. And my transitions into becoming a full-fledged caregiver, helper of caregivers, helping people with caregiving planning. I don't know. I can't really help you understand how it helped me to find something that brought me to a full circle of what I went through with my parents. I guess I can say, think about what you've gone through in your caregiving experience. Look at the lessons you've learned. What can you do with what you learned to build yourself into a new career, to leave an unhappy situation if you were unhappy with what you were doing prior? I did a lot of prayer. I did a lot of talking to different people, but sometimes that can add to a lot of confusion. You have so many people in both ears that you don't hear your own thoughts. So talking to God, praying about, what's next? How am I going to get through this? It's been really challenging, but like I said, looking at what I went through in taking care of Mom after Dad passed, I learned about helping others through helping them with legal documentation, helping them understand insurance, health and life, helping them with financial strategies in planning for retirement and when they become caregivers. It's a very confusing world after you have lost your loved one. And so I guess, does anyone have any questions so far as anything personal you'd like to ask me about my experience, or how anything that's similar in your experience?
So Leslie is writing in the chat room, Kathy, I relate so much to what you are saying. When my dad was in and out of the hospitals, I considered becoming a patient advocate, but it wasn't the right time. I guess that's the big question. How do we know when it's the right time to make a transition with our work?
And that's a good point. Timing is everything. You can't, because if you're going through a period of time, I went from being a caregiver and one parent passing to going straight into another experience. Leslie, I don't know if, you ended up taking care of your mother after this. I can't see the chat room, or if you had someone else you ended up taking care of, but timing is all about when you feel like you've gotten yourself together. I was spinning in a very lost time frame of about 5 years because my mother's illnesses just became overwhelming. She had about 10 to 12 procedures, from her eyes to her colon to having to have all kinds of female problems to neurological problems because dementia and Alzheimer's runs in the family. I had to find that balance, and I had to find something that left me flexible to go with a new career. There's no such thing as perfect timing. It's just, when you know, it's within you. And the aha moment came, I would say the biggest aha moment came during COVID, because I was like, I can't go out and do speaking engagements. I can't go to employers and stand before people and talk about, caregiving or planning for caregiving anymore. I can't talk to them about insurance or anything. I am just at a loss. But during COVID, I sat down and my plans became more clear, because timing wise, I was following other people's leads still. I was still not in control of what was going on. And I still had a pull of taking care of my mother. So I don't know. Timing is up to each individual. There's no perfect time. There's just the experience, and you feel it. You know it when you feel it.
I wonder if those who are joining us could share a little bit about where they feel like they are in their transition. If we were to map out a transition in terms of feeling like you just started entering into a transition, or you feel like you're in the middle, or you feel like you're coming out of it, I'd love to hear from you guys about where you think you are. Sandy's in the middle. Okay. And I also wonder, as you think about where you are in the transition, what's the hardest part about being in that period of time during the transition?
Do you feel fear of trying something new? Fear of failure? What emotions can you guys share your emotions if you're in this phase?
Yeah, Sandy is saying that letting go is difficult. And Rhoda's writing, I started caring for caregivers after I watched my mom care for my grandparents, uncle, and so many people, and finally my dad. There was so much I needed to do for her, and she wouldn't let me. That now I am educating caregivers on the need for self-care. I also launched when COVID first landed in Kenya, so we're international. Rhoda's joining us from Kenya. And Leslie is writing, I'm in my grief journey, but desperately want to have purpose in my life. What Kathy is doing really speaks to me. Leslie, tell us a little bit more about that part that's speaking to you. And then Joan is writing, I'm 10 years on, so I'm past those particular transitions, but life goes on and more transitions will come. And that's the lesson that we learn, right? That sometimes life is the transition. And during our life, we're always transitioning from either a moment in the day or to another experience or to another career.
And life is ever changing. Nothing ever stays the same. Even once I thought I had the answer, COVID came. So I had to pivot and figure out, what am I going to do next? I had to figure out Zoom calls. I had to figure out how to appeal to different people. I'm not a big social media person, but I do know a lot of people through just the experience of the speeches that I was able to get out there and do. And people have passed other people on to me, and I've learned more about, helping them. Um, I'm in desperate need of a virtual assistant. Denise is blessed to have that. But, it's one that you always will have something, but you can't be fearful of taking that chance. I invest a lot of my savings into these certifications. Um, it's sometimes you feel like it's not going anywhere, but then there's that aha moment and you come up with the next thing. It's sometimes hard to describe or talk about. And to the young lady who spoke about her mother won't let go. Yes, that is my mother. Sometimes I don't know if she's faking or if she really is having some issues, because she knows how to manipulate my emotions. She loves me. I love her. But that's just sort of the way she is. Her mother did her that way. Um, that was the grandmother that lived to be 100. You don't always have the right answer. You can't always knee jerk. You just have to follow your emotions. You have to follow what's right, and also be at peace in knowing that you've done all that you can do for your carry. I'm
It's, and I wonder how grieving makes a transition more difficult. I'd love to hear from everybody about the impact of grief on transitions.
Yes, how long, for anybody who's been through this or going through it, how long have you grieved? How long have you, like, I went through a spell of 5 years, just grieving, trying to figure it out.
Oh, I love that, Beth. So grief makes priorities very clear very fast. I'd love to hear more about that, Beth. Yeah, and Sandy is still recovering from a loss that happened in April. And for Leslie, with her parents, it was a 2-year process.
Wow. So, Leslie, a question for you. Where are you right now? Where are your emotions? How do you feel about it? About where you are right now?
And Kathryn, we've got 15 minutes left, so let us know how much of how much time you want to spend with questions and how much time you have left for your presentation.
I only have one slide left, and then it was going to be Q&A.
Okay.
Because this one slide is, this is what I learned. There is no perfect answer. I learned that I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul. There are no perfect answers. There are no perfect occupations. There are no perfect reactions. There's no perfect planning for what you do next if you don't go back to your regular job. I mean, some people I do know they lost their job in the midst of caregiving. So how do you come back from that? Is there anyone online now who's been through that? Because
Leslie is just sharing that her husband recently died, and so the transition for her is even more significant because she has retired and the kids are gone and out of the house. So it's that void of time.
Right.
And Sandy had shared yesterday that she had lost her job doing caregiving, and it was a job that she really loved. And I think when the transition is forced on you, that makes it even tougher. And the transition could be the loss of a job or just even the death. You know, that's not something that is part of a choice. That's something that is happening without our permission, and we have to adjust and transition because of that. And what's interesting is we have this significant transition in our life after someone has a significant transition in their life, which is the transition to whatever happens after death. So for those of you that feel like you're in the midst of a transition, what's the question that you find yourself asking? Maybe it's throughout the day, or maybe it's in the middle of the night and it wakes you up. Maybe it's once in a while throughout the week. I will share one question that I have, and that is, will I have enough? We talked yesterday about will I be enough? And I think when you think about your own future, you can kind of wonder, will I have enough for my future? So Joan is writing that one question she asks is, what now? Right? What now?
So in the what now phase, when I think back to that for myself in transition, I just, honestly, I kind of thought I was just stuck being my mother's caregiver, that I wouldn't have anything else to do. The old me is gone. This is just going to be my life. But in the midst of that transition, it's a little off of work. I was clearing, it took 2.5 years to clear out the home house. Once I got my mother into a living facility where she could socialize with other people, she didn't want to leave home. And that drug me down even harder. So while I'm being hard on myself, honestly, about, I spun for 5 years, most of it was, trying to do the contract work and take care of her because she drug her feet in leaving. She stood her ground. She did not want to go. And then once I did get her into a community where she could socialize and maybe I could get back to a normal work life and be a great employee, she took 2.5 years to clear out the house. And in the midst of that, little did I know, my husband rang the front doorbell. And I ended up married like about 9 months later. But my mother came from an era of men being in control of their lives. So how dare her youngest daughter come in and tell her what to do? Tell her she needed to move to independent living. Tell her or advise her And I wasn't telling her anything. Sometimes when she became a little childish at times, I had to tell her and be a little firm. But I advised her on great things, financially, legally, things to do for herself. And she would not listen to me. But you let a man come along. She listened to cousins of mine who were male cousins, who were doctors or directors of large organizations. But what am I? Chopped liver? And so she pushed me, she held me back for a while because she did not want to, she wanted to do whatever they recommended, which was what I recommended. But at the same time, I couldn't go forward. I was stuck. So when I just decided, my mom let go finally after I got married. That was the trigger. And that was the timing. Just to be honest, that was the timing because she let go because she did not want to interfere in her almost 50-year-old daughter's life with her husband. Because I had given so much. I thought I was going to be an old maid, stuck, no life. And, if I did choose to remain single, that's fine. But she did not respect me enough to let me go and live my life.
So we've been talking in the chat room about the transitions and the risk that comes with the transition. The transition is moving us from one place to another place, but that other place feels uncertain. We haven't quite figured it out or put all the pieces together. And that uncertainty moves us into a place of fear. So the transition can be really a significantly frightening experience for us. And so I'd love to know from everyone when you feel like, oh my gosh, I can feel myself really getting afraid of this. How do you manage the fear? So Leslie's writing at first, the worry was we wouldn't have enough money if my husband needed to be in an Alzheimer's unit. Of course, the cost is significant. He instead went unexpectedly fast. Now I have the paradigm shift of having no strings holding me, but I have no direction. The fear isn't just making choices, right? It's that feeling of being rudderless, that you don't have an anchor that's helping you figure out which way to look and then which way to step. And Beth is on the same wavelength. Picture what you want to see. Take a first step. And I think we lost Kathy. I think we lost her. Okay. So let's spend just the next 5 minutes or so really thinking about the fears around our transitions. And I'd love for you guys to unmute yourself and let's talk about, what does fear feel like for you? How do you know it's fear?
It's that physical sensation. I can feel it tightening around my chest and in shoulder. And yeah.
So your body, it has a reaction to it, to the fear.
Can I say something?
Yep, go for it, Jill.
So yesterday I talked a lot about the thoughts that create those emotions. And one of the things that causes fear in most people is the unknown. And that's kind of exactly what we're talking about right now. When we don't know what the future is going to look like, it's more fearful and it's more uncomfortable for us than when we're in a difficult situation. And that's one reason that, people can't leave an abusive relationship, because the situation they're in right now is so uncomfortable, but the fear of not knowing what it's going to look like if they get out of the situation is even worse. And so people really have trouble taking steps forward when they don't know how things are going to turn out. It's so important to just take steps like Beth just said, to just start. You just have to start somewhere, and then the fear just slides away because you're doing something and you're believing that something's going to happen.
So I'd love to hear who has taken a step in fear and what that step was.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken so many steps into fear.
I guess my biggest step into fear was getting involved with Len after a horrible divorce.
Oh,
That took a leap of faith. I was single for 14 years before we got married, and he had been single for longer after divorce. So that was a big step.
that is trust.
Another shot.
Yes, trusting that the second marriage will be different than the first.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose in some regard, the trust is in ourselves too, that we are trusting ourselves to make a different, better choice.
Well, years of counseling hopefully helped with that.
It's a good investment, right? That was your investment in your better choice.
Yes.
It's never a bad thing. I'm back. I don't know what happened.
Wow.
So
this is Deb. One of the most interesting comments a counselor said to me one time is, "You're shining tennis shoes." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, tennis shoes shouldn't be clean. If you're shining tennis shoes, you're trying to take your idea or your mind away from what needs to be done." So if I find myself shining tennis shoes, which for me can be reading more than I normally would, I'm like, okay, something's going on. What am I afraid of? What am I not looking at? So that's always stuck in my head. Wait a minute, I'm shining tennis shoes. What's going on?
in essence, the busyness that makes us look productive, but really is a way for us to hide from the true productivity that our life or our day needs.
Exactly.
I think of that as buying office furniture before you start a business, or spending a lot of time developing your logo for your business rather than actually going out and getting clients for your business. So Kathryn, we just have just about 3 minutes left. So why don't you close us with some final thoughts?
So I'm sorry about that, you guys. The system locked up. I don't know what happened, but I'm on my phone now. I just wanted to let you know, if you are in a position where you feel stuck, you don't know what to do, you are confused, and you don't want to betray yourself or mess anything up, take a leap of faith. Do you go out and find something within you? Well, look within yourself and find something that will make you feel good and help others. That's sort of how I was raised. You want to make sure that anything you do, you help others. You are not alone in whatever you go through. And if you can do your best by giving back, you're not doing wrong. You're always going to come out on top. Look at Denise, over 20 years of working with others, and how we're all being blessed with virtual retreats, actual caregiving conferences. It's been wonderful. So find peace within yourself, look into your heart, and you'll know the right time. No one else can tell you when that is, but take chances. Okay. You are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, thanks so much, Kathryn. Thank you so much.